What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. And this time we're taking a look at Dawn of the Dead, written and directed by George A. Romero. This is the second film in his Living Dead franchise. The storyline of this movie is as follows: a group of survivors take refuge in a mall during the zombie apocalypse. So, yeah, that is the basic premise of this movie. Let's briefly go over Dawn of the Dead. So, I have been wanting to see Dawn of the Dead for a very, very long time. Basically, for as long as I can remember, every retrospective on horror movies I've seen, every documentary I've seen on horror movies, and just about every single, just you name it, commentator out there has always heralded Dawn of the Dead as one of the greatest horror movies ever put to film, and more or less George A. Romero's magnum opus of a film. Like, this is his, like, if you want like, if you want a crash course on George Romero, everyone always says Dawn of the Dead is the movie to watch because it encapsulates everything that man has to offer in terms of his talents. So after finally watching this movie for the first time, I can honestly say that I find it very hard to disagree with those commentators. Dawn of the Dead is a fantastic movie. This movie kicks all kinds of ass. I had such a fun time watching this movie. Uh, while I do overall like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead kicks that movie's ass in several spades. Everything about Dawn, whatever I did not care for in Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero gets it right in Dawn of the Dead. Like, Night of the Living Dead was a good template of what he has to bring, and Dawn of the Dead, which came out 10 years after Night of the Living Dead, is basically Romero with skills that are more fine-tuned and having a better sense of maturity. His writing in this movie is more snappy. His characters are more fleshed out. The cast of actors that he has in this movie are all great. With Ken Foree, the badass, being an absolute standout as the character of Peter. But I also like the other three survivors. I like the characters of Flyboy and Flygirl. This couple named Steven and Franny. I thought they were really, really good. I also like the character of Roger, known as Trooper, and the friendship that he has, and the friendship that he develops with Peter throughout the course of the movie. I thought all four of these characters had great dynamics, and I really bought them as being their own unit. And when they take refuge in a mall and basically contort it into their own little mini cap, you really see their camaraderie form. You really see how and you really see them develop into a kind of sort of family-like unit. Like, they're in it together, and they do whatever they can for the betterment of the group as a whole. I thought that aspect was handled so well. And when you compare it to Night of the Living Dead, this movie to me this felt better. These felt like a group of characters who I want to see survive. And when they get picked off, you feel those deaths because you've grown to love these characters. Like, you grow to love the character of Peter because he has this commanding presence and he's the de facto leader, if you will, of this group. You like the character of Trooper because you also like the character of Trooper because, he's a cowboy. Like, he wants to go in the fight, and and he, more or less, you can almost say he's like the second in command next to Peter. These two guys are like Peter and Trooper. They're like, they're cops. They're like cops basically. So they got the training. And then you got Flyboy and Flygirl, who bring their own little dynamic to this family, to this group, and they also develop their skills as fighters as well. So, like, all that stuff for these guys, done awesome. No complaints whatsoever. The way George Romero is able to pace out this story. So the version I saw was the extended cut. So I saw more or less the more complete version, if you will, of this movie. So how I feel about Dawn of the Dead may be different than how other people might feel about Dawn of the Dead. Mainly because I have a more complete I saw a more complete version of the film where I got to see the characters interact with each other more and just have scenes of them just hanging out. Like, there's a good chunk of this movie where they're just hanging out and doing stuff and just and like enjoying themselves and making the most out of and making the best out of a horrible situation. Makes them feel like real people and real characters who I want to see triumph. Uh, so all that stuff is great. And then of course when you get to the end of the movie, you have these other set of characters who are like bikers who come in and just loot and ransack the mall. And you really see the differences between how Peter leads his group and how the bikers do their thing. Peter and his group, they're more organized and they make the best out of a situation where they made this mall habitable. And you see them make the mall habitable throughout the course of the movie. When the bikers invade in the last half of the movie, it's chaotic. It's just carnage. It's just destruction. They're just there to loot, ransack, take what they want, and leave. It's disorganized. And you want to see these bikers get taken out because they pretty much took the safe haven of the mall and they pretty much turned it into Zombie Central. So I like that parallel. I like the dynamics between the two different groups. And I like how, for the most part, Peter and Flyboy kind of sort of work together to try and fend off the bikers out of the mall, which they do successfully in a way. But the mall gets overtaken by zombies really, really quickly. It gets to the point where Flyboy, he unfortunately meets his end and becomes one of the Walking Dead. And more or less, Peter and Francine escape the mall after Peter attempts suicide but changes his mind and he ends up leaving with Franny. Now, you're wondering what happened to Roger. Well, right before the bikers invade the mall, Roger was attacked and was eventually turned, and in a mercy killing, Peter took him out. Peter took out his friend, took out his boy. So, and I like it. I like how Roger's demise was handled, because you grew to like Roger throughout the course of this movie. Yeah, he was a wild card a little bit, and you can tell that he was more like a cowboy, but he was still very, very likable. And you love the camaraderie with him and Peter, because at the team, these two guys work fantastic, and they're great together. So yeah, that stuff was handled well. Steven's death, Flyboy, his death was, he tried to go out fighting. He eventually succumbs and turns into one of the Walking Dead, and he's eventually taken out by Peter at the end of the movie. So all that stuff I thought was handled really, really well. Other things I like about this movie. I like how Romero handled the zombies in this movie. And I also, like many, really like the satirical social commentary on consumerism and these characters being trapped in a mall, and the subconscious of these zombies lures them to the mall because it's a part of their humanity that they still have some sort of connection to. And this actually is paid off at the end of the movie when Flyboy becomes a zombie. He instinctively goes to the fake wall that he and Peter built as a way to barricade themselves, as a way to hide themselves in the event of looters coming into the mall and ransacking. So like zombie Flyboy was able to find that fake wall. It's a nice payoff. Like Romero shows that the zombies still have a small feint of intelligence within them, even though their humanity is gone. There's still a trace of it left that gives them an intelligence, and I like it. Like Romero was one of the first to give like zombies in the Living Dead small traces of humanity and small traces of intelligence, which actually makes them much more scarier, in my opinion, at least. So all that stuff was handled really, really well. If I were to have some complaints about this movie, I would say the first 30 minutes is kind of slow, though I do like the whole raid on the housing projects. I think that scene is just bombastic and just completely on a different level of just brutality, where the SWAT team are killing a bunch of zombies in this housing projects because the people living there pretty much are housing their dead loved ones. So they had to call us, and they refused to let their loved ones go. So a SWAT team is brought in to pretty much erase them all. This is our first introductions to the characters of Peter and Trooper, and we go from there to, and from there we go to Steven and Francine, who are actually working in a newsroom at the beginning of the movie. And then these four kind of get together, become their own little unit, and the rest of the movie plays out as I explained earlier. Then the last thing I want to mention, or the last few things I want to mention, this George Romero's directing, top notch, 10 times more refined in this movie. The social commentary is on point. The writing's much more sharper, much more wittier, and I love his utilization of dark comedy in this movie. The Romero with this movie was able to mix his scares with humor, and in a lot of instances, you're both scared and laughing at the same time. uh, Particularly when Peter and the group are like gathering supplies around the mall and they're killing zombies while doing so. It's done in a very just playful way. And when the bikers do it, it's done in a more mean-spirited way. No, they're just decapitating everything. They're throwing pies in the zombies' faces. So you get that nice blend of dark humor, which got a lot of laughs out of me, not gonna lie. And of course, I cannot end this review without mentioning Tom Savini, and this being one of his first big major movies. And of course, Tom Savini is the GOAT when it comes to practical makeup effects, and his work is in glorious display in this movie. Savini's effects in this movie, top notch. They look absolutely fantastic. Zero complaints. Michael Gornick's cinematography in this movie, also top notch. Movie looks great. Movie looks great from a technical level. Yeah, I think that's really all I got to say about Dawn of the Dead. At the end of the day, this movie to me, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Dawn of the Dead is great. It's fantastic. Deserves to be heralded as one of the greatest horror movies ever made, and possibly one of the greatest zombie movies ever made. So yeah, if you've not seen Dawn of the Dead, give it a watch. You can find it on YouTube. Even though you can find it on YouTube. There's like a bunch of versions on YouTube. Unfortunately, very hard to come across a physical copy due to rights issues that I don't really have much of a knowledge of. I just know the bare bones of it. But yeah, there's some versions uploaded on YouTube. So if you can find it, give it a watch. You won't be disappointed. Anyway, my name's AJ Legend. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.